Shalom, giving honor and praise unto the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. This is Yeshaya Yisrael. We are going over the proposed contradictions in the Old Testament explained part 3. Now, I want to go, if we will, into the book of Genesis chapter 23, verse 2, so we can gain some understanding. And it says, "And Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, the same is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abram came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her." Now, a lot of times people may not understand what happens when somebody passes away. And that is the fact that they're mourning, they're feeling sad, and they want to sit there and get certain things to have their spirit to be comforted. And that was his wife. So obviously that's the way that Abraham had felt. Now, people actually, no offense intended, try to go into Genesis chapter 23, verse 2, and then say there's a contradiction between that and what we're going to read in Joshua chapter 14, verse 15. And let's read that so that way we can gain some understanding. All right, we are now in the book of Joshua 14, verse 15, and it says, "And the name of Hebron before was Kiriath Arba, which Arba was a great man among the Anakim, and the land had rest from war." Now, what this is talking about, brothers and sisters, is just letting you know good and well that the land called Hebron, as well as the land called Kiriath Arba, is the exact same place. Now, let's go over some linguistics, if we will. The word Kiriath means city, okay? I have a book here. It is entitled A Pocket Dictionary in Hebrew and English. All right, now in here on page 806, we see the word right here, Quiria, town or city. Now, when you say Quiryat right here, with the tau at the end of that particular word, what's going on there is it's showing it and showing possession. For instance, you will have the Hebrew word Quiria, which means city or town. Then you have Quiryat, which means city of, town of. For instance, it shows the possession of. In Hebrew, you have it to where the Hebrew letter He and Tau are feminine letters, okay? So, hat in Hebrew is the Hebrew word kifa. So, kifati is my hat. So, if you say Quiria, meaning city or town, you will have it to where Quiriati would mean my city or my town. Okay, so let that be noted and understood. So now, I have a dictionary here, if we can gain some understanding. And this dictionary is called the American Heritage College Dictionary. And we are going to go to page 49 and read on a word called anachronism so we can gain some understanding. It says, 1, under the definition of anachronism, representation of someone as existing or something as happening in order than the chronological, proper, or historical order. Representation of someone as existing or something as happening in other than the chronological, proper, or historical order. Wanted to sit there and read that properly again, so that way we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. When you're dealing in the book of Joshua, chapter 14, verse 15, as well as in the book of Genesis, chapter 23, verse 2, it is dealing under the content of what we will call today an anachronism. Okay, let's read this one more time. It says anachronism, right? Representation of someone as existing or something as happening in other than the chronological, proper, or historical order. So let that be noted and understood. Now I'm going to go into two different sources to try to explain my point. Let's go to Egypt, okay? The city that is now called, or in archaeology, that is now called the city of Thebes, right? The ancient Israelites called that same city the land of No. The ancient Egyptians had their own particular name for it called the land of Waset. Okay? So let that be noted and understood. The land that we call here in, like in this case, New York City, the Native Americans that lived here called it the land of Canarsie. And when the English and the Europeans came over, they called it what? Part of the land of New England. But even before the English came, the Dutch called what we call New York, or mainly Manhattan, which is one of the boroughs in New York, they called it New Amsterdam. So my point in mentioning all of that is you have to understand who is calling it, when are they speaking of such a matter, and the linguistics of the people. Because all of that is very, very important. If you don't understand and realize that Hebron and Kiryat Arba is the exact same place, then you're going to miss certain things. Kiryat, as stated, means city of or town of. So Kiryat Arba, it is the city of four. The word Arba means four, Four. Okay, the number four. So that way we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. Now, the word Hebron comes from the Hebrew word kabar, which means to tie in or to mesh in. And the word Hebron means friendship, because that's what friends do. They tie into each other. So that's an understanding as far as that is concerned. Okay, now getting back into Genesis chapter 23, verse 2, we read, "And Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, the same as Hebron, in the land of Canaan." Now, the author of this is obviously writing after the event that happened. So therefore, the person is letting the reader know exactly what location that he or she is speaking of as the author of it in his or her day and time. That is an understanding that is done, is certainly in the scriptures, and is also, for those who may be concerned, it is also done in Akkadian records. That is also done in reference with that. Okay, now, if we can move on, so that way, hopefully that's understood. Let's go into another thing that they like to say is a contradictory thing in the Old Testament. Let's go to the book of Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. Okay, and it says this. "Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of Elohim, even to Horeb." Now, some people take this and say it's a contradictory statement to what we're going to read now. Let's go to Numbers chapter 12, verse 1. So that way we can gain some understanding concerning this matter right here. And it says this. Numbers chapter 12, verse 1. And we read, "And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman." Now, some people sit there and state that's a contradictory statement, because one wife in one place is called the daughter of a Midianite, which means that she would have been a Midianite. But then in Numbers, it is saying that he is married to an Ethiopian woman. There's a thing called polygamy or polygyny. That is to say, when a man has more than one wife. You see, that's why history and context has to be noted and understood. Moses had two wives. Now, when you go into the book of Josephus and you read about the history of Moses, you read about how he was a general within the land of Egypt and how he helped the Egyptians before he went into understanding his role as a Hebrew, even though he always knew himself as a Hebrew. When he was an official inside of the Egyptian army, he led, or helped lead, that is, the Egyptians into as archaeologists and sociologists like to call it now, an expedition. But in candid terms, it's called leading the people into a war. Okay? And when, according into the book of Josephus, when Moses did that, he wound up getting one of the wives that he had from the Ethiopian people. So thus explains, when you go into the book of Numbers, how Moses had an Ethiopian wife. Third beasts that you read of in the book of Josephus and Zipporah, as you read of in the book of Exodus, are not the same woman. Moses had more than one wife. Case in point, case closed on that. So therefore, let that be noted and understood. Another thing that people like to go to try to say, oh, the scriptures is contradictory, is in the book of Exodus chapter 3, verse 22. And it says, "But every woman shall borrow of her neighbor, and of her that sojourneth in her house, jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment, and ye shall put them upon your sons and upon your daughters, and you shall spoil the Egyptians. Now, they will go there and then go to Exodus chapter 11, verse 2, to try to make a point, attempting to state that the scriptures is contradictory. And it says, speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold. And the Most High gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. So, looking at this right here, people amazingly forget the part where it says, speak, ears, people, let man borrow his neighbor, woman, neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold. They read, amazingly though it's not inside of the text, tell the children of Israel to go and steal from the Egyptians and plunder them. That's not what the scripture says. But those who attempt to sit there and attempt to state that it's contradictory like to state that. Then they'll take you to Leviticus, if you will. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 11. All right. And it says this, Leviticus 19, verse 11, and it says the following. You shall not steal, neither deal falsely, nor lie one to another. Verse 13. Thou shalt not defraud thy neighbor, neither rob him. The wages of him that is hired shall not abide with thee all night until the morning. Now they use those scriptures right there in the book of Leviticus 19, 11, and 13. And forget one, Leviticus 19 is in reference with Israel and how Israel deals with Israel and how Israel deals with the other nations. The difference between that and what we read in the book of Exodus chapter 3, verse 22, and Exodus chapter 11, verse 2, is the fact that we're talking about what you call spoils of war. The children of Israel was coming out from a captivity. So in today's terminology, when it says jewels of silver and jewels of gold, that will be called what you call today reparations for being enslaved. Okay, and so that right there is to put it in terms of with our people. There's a guy who wrote a book, what America owes to blacks, the debt. That's the name of the book. The name of the book is called The Debt, What America Owes to Blacks. And if the tally was made up, the United States of America for black people being enslaved will not be able to pay our people. They can't afford it economically. You understand? So what's going on, using that understanding and knowing that the children of Israel were enslaved in Egypt. And for anybody who wonder if there were any Hebrew slaves in the land of Egypt, one of the things I will ask for you to look up is called the Brooklyn Papyrus 35.1446. Now, you may want to also look up Senebtisi. That is spelled as, because we went over this in another part, Senebtisi. Senebtisi and the Brooklyn Papyrus 35.1446. And it is translated inside of a book called, the name of the book is called The Ancient Near East, edited by James Pritchard, Volume 2. That entire papyrus is basically translated, and it shows you that ancient Egyptians had a record of what they call the Kimnu, which was a word for slave. And over 40 or 50% of the people in southern Egypt, what they call Upper Egypt as slaves, were Hebrews. Okay, so now getting back to this point right here, what we're reading, our brothers and sisters, in the book of Exodus chapter 3 is what you will call, in today's terminology, called reparations. But obviously, the people who want to present the idea of saying that somebody was stealing and defrauding, you forgot about the enslavement because you got the mind of a slave master. And in concluding this particular part right here, if we will, brothers and sisters, and that is the fact that you have some who sit there and state that Moses murdered. Moses didn't murder nobody. When he saw his brother in the book of Exodus getting beat by an Egyptian overseer, he looked this way, he looked that way, and he put the Egyptian overseer to death. He didn't murder nobody any more than Nat Turner did. He didn't murder nobody no more than Gabriel Prosper did. He didn't murder nobody any more than Harriet Tubman would have done if push came to shove. May all of them rest in peace today. So one of the things to let it be noted is you have to understand what was going on. Who was the author? who was the speaker and the linguistics of the matter. Because if anybody wants to sit there and state that Moses was a murderer, or he murdered somebody and so forth and so on, you forgot that he was defending his brother. And you got to be a coon to sit back and think Moses murdered somebody, knowing the situation of what was going on there. Peace. Shalom.